I'm crazy about my husband, so that there's an upside to this
Yes.
emptiness.
Nobody expected it. Not after 4 decades under Hollywood's brightest lights. Not from a woman who had become the symbol of America's sweetheart. A legend wrapped in grace, privacy, and that impossible smile. But at 58, sitting beneath the soft glow of studio lights, Julia Roberts inhaled slowly, lifted her eyes, and shattered the image the world had worshipped for nearly 40 years. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't smirk for effect. Instead, she whispered, softly, deliberately, like someone unlocking a door she had kept sealed for a lifetime. There are 7 men, she said. 7 actors, 7 legends, 7 connections that shaped me in ways no one has ever known. The room froze. This wasn't the Julia Roberts who arrived with polished anecdotes or charming scripted smiles. This was a woman, raw, unarmored, ready to reveal the truths she had protected longer than most careers in Hollywood even last. And as her breath steadied, she began to peel back the curtain on a secret history that had existed only behind closed doors, in unspoken memories, and in the quiet places where fame fades and truth begins. She leaned back, eyes shimmering with the weight of decades. The first name, she whispered, was Tom Cruise. Julia's smile shifted, not the dazzling movie star smile the world knew, but a softer, almost nostalgic one. When she spoke Tom Cruise's name, it wasn't scandal she was recalling. It was something far more intimate, far more human. Tom moved through the world with a certainty that was almost hypnotic. She began, her voice lowering into a gentle murmur, as though she were confessing directly into someone's ear. People saw the action hero, the impossible stunts, the relentless determination, but beneath that, there was a vulnerability few ever saw. She paused, her eyes drifting somewhere far beyond the studio walls, back to the film set where everything between them had quietly, unexpectedly begun. When we worked together, she continued, there were these moments, teeny stolen moments, where time stopped. Between takes, when the cameras paused and the world fell away, Tom would look at you like you were the only person alive. And in those seconds, you saw the real him, the man, not the myth. Her breath trembled slightly, as if memory and emotion were woven tightly together. One night, she said, softly, we were in New Orleans. It had been an exhausting shoot. I stepped onto the balcony of my hotel room just to breathe. And then Tom appeared, not with a script, not with Hollywood energy, just himself. The studio remained still, the silence thick with anticipation. We talked until sunrise, Julia whispered. Not about movies, not about fame, but about life, fears, dreams. The parts of ourselves we never showed anyone. I told him things I've never repeated to another soul. Her voice warmed, filled with the kind of affection that time cannot erase. That night changed us. It shifted something quietly, profoundly. It wasn't just chemistry. It wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. 2 people seeing each other under all the layers we were forced to wear. It was rare. It was real. And it stayed with me. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory settle before releasing it. That was a Tom, she said. Intensity wrapped in tenderness. A man the world admired for all the wrong reasons, while the truth of him lived in the quiet. Julia exhaled as though one chapter of her hidden story had finally been set free. Julia's expression changed once more, this time into something gentler, lighter, almost wistful. If Tom Cruise was intensity wrapped in fire, then Brad Pitt was the opposite. a warm breeze instead of a storm. Brad, she said softly, letting the name linger in the air. There was always something effortless about him. He moved through life like he was dancing, and you couldn't help but be drawn into his rhythm. She smiled, remembering. We met early in our careers, long before he became Brad Pitt, before the world claimed him as an icon. Back then, he was just this beautiful soul with a spark in his eyes and a kindness that felt rare in Hollywood. They never worked together on camera, yet somehow fate kept pulling them into the same orbit. Events, gatherings, quiet pockets of time when their paths crossed naturally, without intention. There was an unspoken connection, Julia continued, not loud, not dramatic, just this gentle pull between us. You could feel it every time our eyes met across a room. Her voice lowered. There was one night in Aspen I'll never forget. The snow was falling outside, the kind that makes the world feel soft and silent. We ended up talking for hours about everything and nothing. Life, fear, the future, the past. It was the kind of conversation that just strips away all pretenses. She took a breath, the kind that carries weight. And somewhere in those hours, something shifted. Not planned, not forced. Just two people being real in a world that's rarely real. By dawn, we were no longer just friends. The studio was completely still. Brad made vulnerability feel safe, she said. He didn't judge. He didn't expect anything. With him, you didn't have to be Julia Roberts. You could just be. Her smile grew faint, touched with bittersweet honesty. What we shared was brief, but it mattered. It was real in its own quiet way, and sometimes that's enough. She leaned back again, the memory settling gently inside her. A different kind of a stillness passed over Julia's face. Thoughtful, introspective, touched with a deeper emotion. If Tom was intensity and Brad was warmth, then Leonardo DiCaprio was something far more complex. Leo, she whispered, almost reverently. From the moment I met him, I knew he wasn't like anyone else. She didn't smile this time. Instead, she seemed to drift into a memory filled with both admiration and something unspoken. People see the superstar, the awards, the roles, the environmental crusader, but they don't understand the mind behind all that. Leo thinks deeply. He questions everything. He's curious in a way that feels almost consuming. Julia recalled the night they really connected years ago at an industry event. The crowd was loud and glittering, but somehow the two of them slipped into their own world. We talked for hours, she said, about film, about the planet, about the things we loved and the things we'd lost. I wasn't expecting anything. But the intellectual spark between us was immediate, sharp, and bright. She exhaled slowly, remembering how the spark had shifted into something more dangerous, more intimate. One night, I went to his apartment after a long event. We weren't planning anything. We just needed a quiet place to continue the conversation. But as the night deepened, the energy changed. Her voice dropped to a quiet, confessional tone. When he kissed me, it wasn't impulsive, it wasn't casual, it was deliberate, like he was speaking a language without words. Leo loves with the same intensity he acts, fully present, completely committed, nothing held back. She paused, letting the truth settle. It was overwhelming in the most beautiful way. Afterward, we just lay there, not speaking, not explaining, because we understood. Whatever happened between us that night was ours alone, a moment outside of Hollywood, outside of expectations. Her expression softened but grew heavier, touched with honesty. I never tried to define what we were. Maybe we couldn't. But what we shared, it was real. It was profound, and it left a mark. She leaned back, letting the weight of that memory drift into the shadows. A sudden, almost involuntary laugh escaped Julia, soft, genuine, warmed by memory. The tension in the room eased instantly, as if merely speaking his name shifted the entire atmosphere. "Owen Wilson," she said, shaking her head gently. "Even now, just thinking of him makes me smile." Her eyes brightened in a way they hadn't before, not with longing, not with melancholy, but with a kind of joy that felt refreshingly simple. Owen had this energy about him, this lightness, she continued. He never tried to impress anyone. He didn't need to. He was comfortable in his own skin in a way that made you feel comfortable too. Julia met him on a film set, a place where pressure, schedules, and perfection usually overshadow everything else. But Owen was a breath of fresh air. From the first day, she said, there was this ease between us. No games, no pretense, just two people who genuinely liked being around each other. She chuckled softly, remembering details she had clearly carried for years. He would tell me the most ridiculous stories, these wild, funny things that made absolutely no sense, but somehow made perfect sense coming from him. I'd laugh until my sides hurt, and in those moments, it felt like the entire world softened. Her voice grew quieter, tender beneath the humor. We had a beautiful little thing during that film, nothing complicated, nothing heavy, just an effortless connection. She leaned forward slightly, her expression warm. We'd steal moments on set, a corner behind a lighting rig, a quiet hallway, anywhere we could be just ourselves for a few minutes. He'd lean in with that laid-back confidence of his and kiss me like none of the Hollywood chaos mattered. Then, with a thoughtful pause, Owen wasn't shallow. People assume funny people aren't deep, but he was. He carried insights under all that charm. He just chose joy more often than pain, and that to me was extraordinary. A soft sigh escaped her, not of regret, but gratitude. What we had was brief, she said, but it was pure, it was light, and it came into my life at exactly the moment I needed it. She settled back again, her smile lingering long after the memory faded. Julia's smile shifted once more, this time deeper, more charged, carrying the unmistakable echo of passion long buried but never forgotten. "Matthew," she murmured, almost tasting the name. With him, everything felt different. Everything felt alive. Her posture changed subtly, as though recalling a presence that once filled entire rooms. People see the charm, the southern drawl, the easy swagger, but Matthew McConaughey, he radiated something far more powerful, a kind of magnetic confidence that pulled you in before you even realized it was happening. She paused, eyes softening with a mixture of warmth and fire. When we worked together early in our careers, the chemistry was undeniable, practically electric. Every scene, every glance, every moment shared, it carried a heat just beneath the surface, a tension we both tried to ignore until we couldn't. Julia's voice dropped lower, more intimate. Off camera, he was even more intoxicating. He wasn't just charming, he was thoughtful, present. He listened with his whole body like every word mattered. And when he talked about life, there was poetry in the way he saw the world. She smiled, remembering a moment only two people had ever known. We used to meet in places no one would ever think to look. Quiet hideaways, dimly lit porches, rooms filled with music and secrets. He'd bring his guitar, strumming softly while we talked about everything and nothing. Then, with a slow breath, and when he kissed me, God, it was the kind of kiss that makes you forget your own name. She lifted her chin slightly, speaking with a newfound clarity. Our connection lasted for months, intense, beautiful, untamed. But life in Hollywood isn't designed to protect things like that. Our schedules pulled us apart. Not suddenly, not painfully, just inevitably. Her gaze softened with nostalgia, not regret. But the way he made me feel, seen, desired, understood, that stayed with me. Matthew had this rare, raw honesty that disarmed you. You couldn't hide from him because he never hid from you. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the memory settle like dust returning to sunlight. He was a chapter in my life, one written in heat, truth, and the kind of connection that doesn't fade, even when it has to end. Julia reopened her eyes, a quiet strength behind them now. A different kind of warmth passed through Julia's expression, calmer, steadier, touched with reverence. If Matthew was fire, then Denzel Washington was something sacred. Denzel, she said softly, almost like a prayer. There are very few men in this industry who carry themselves with the kind of dignity he does. He walks into a room and you feel it before he even speaks. Her voice slowed as if matching the grounding presence she remembered. He wasn't just talented, he was good. And that combination is incredibly rare in Hollywood. Julia recalled the first time they truly connected, an industry event where she expected nothing more than surface-level conversation. But then Denzel arrived with quiet confidence and a gaze that didn't just look at you, but into you. We started talking, she continued, and suddenly hours slipped by like minutes. He listened in a way that made you feel seen, not as Julia Roberts, but as a person. He wasn't waiting for his turn to speak. He wasn't distracted. He was present, entirely present. Her eyes glowed with an affection that was tender and sincere. That night, something shifted between us, gently, naturally, and what followed wasn't dramatic, wasn't reckless, it was thoughtful, intentional, profound. She paused, exhaling softly. Denzel loved with clarity, she said. There were no games, no confusion. He was direct about how he felt and respectful in a way that made you feel safe, truly safe. The memory seemed to carry both sweetness and sorrow. Our connection was beautiful, she continued, but it was also complicated. Our lives were rooted in different places, moving in different directions. We both knew that. And because we respected each other so deeply, we didn't try to force something that couldn't last. Her voice warmed, filled with gratitude. I'll always have a profound affection for him. Denzel showed me a kind of love that was intentional, measured, and real. The kind that doesn't burn you, but holds you. She leaned back, her expression peaceful, like someone revisiting a memory that healed rather than hurt. Your next chapter waits in the shadows of the most complicated man of all. The moment Julia spoke his name, the room changed. It was subtle, like the air itself thickened, charged with something darker, deeper, more dangerous. Johnny, she whispered, and even that single word carried the weight of an entire history. Johnny was unlike anyone I had ever known. Her expression softened, but not with warmth, more with ache. He was light and darkness wrapped into one person, a storm and a sanctuary, an artist so dedicated to disappearing into his roles that sometimes you wondered if he still knew who he was underneath. She paused long enough for the silence to take shape. When you meet Johnny, you're not just meeting a man, you're meeting a searcher, someone constantly digging through the world, through people, through himself, looking for meaning, for truth, for something he could never quite name. Their connection didn't begin with flirtation or chemistry or even intention. It happened at a moment in our lives where we were both lost, she admitted quietly, both searching, both carrying wounds we didn't know how to talk about. Her voice dropped to a deeper, softer register. There was a magnetism between us that neither of us anticipated. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't slow. It was the kind of pull that feels inevitable, like gravity. What they shared wasn't easy, wasn't simple, wasn't pretty. Johnny had a vulnerability that made you want to hold him, she said, and a darkness that made you want to run. She looked down for a moment, remembering something she hadn't spoken aloud in years. We loved each other, she confessed, but it was a love built from two people who were both broken in their own ways. I wanted to save him. He wanted to consume me, and neither of those things could lead to something steady. Their time together was passionate, electric, unforgettable, and heartbreaking, she finished softly, because we wanted different things and we both knew it. She inhaled deeply, her voice trembling, not with weakness, but with truth. But the moments we shared, they changed me. They taught me about the cost of connection, about how love can shape you even when it doesn't last. Johnny was a chapter carved into my life with fire. When she looked up again, her eyes held the kind of clarity that only comes after years of reflection. He was the one who left the deepest mark. A long silence followed, heavy, meaningful, final. The silence, after Julia finished the speaking, Johnny Depp's name felt almost sacred. The interviewer, the crew, even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if none of them wanted to break the fragile truth hanging in the air. Finally, the host leaned forward, choosing his words with care. Julia, these are some of the biggest names in Hollywood history. Were all of these relationships completely hidden from the public? Julia tilted her head slightly, considering the question. When she answered, her voice carried a wisdom sharpened by decades of living under a scrutiny. Hidden? She repeated softly. No, not hidden. Protected. She let that word settle. There's a difference, she continued. Hiding something means you're ashamed of it. Protecting something means it matters too much to share with the world. Her gaze drifted somewhere distant, as though revisiting memories she had guarded fiercely for years. These connections weren't scandals, Julia said. They were sacred. Each one taught me something different about desire, about truth, about who I was becoming. She paused, her tone deepening. When I was younger, I thought being open about everything made me authentic. I wanted the world to know me, all of me. But as time went on, I realized that the most meaningful parts of life don't need an audience. A soft, knowing smile touched her lips. People want gossip. They want the messy details, the secret, forbidden parts. But real intimacy, real connection doesn't exist for the world. It exists between two people, quietly, in the spaces nobody else sees. The interviewer nodded slowly, absorbing her words before asking the next question. But surely there were rumors, especially with actors you worked closely with. Julia laughed, a gentle, amused sound that held years of experience behind it. Oh, there were always rumors, she replied. In Hollywood, rumors travel faster than sound, faster than light even. Her eyes sparkled, but rumors were always so boring compared to the truth. They were based on what people thought they saw, a glance, a smile, a moment on screen. She leaned forward slightly, voice steady and sincere. What they never understood was how vulnerable actors become when they create emotional worlds together. When you dive into roles that demand everything from you, sometimes that vulnerability leads to something real. Her tone grew more reflective. Tom and I understood each other's ambition. Brad showed me gentleness beneath beauty. Leo taught me intellectual passion. Owen gave me lightness. Matthew showed me the beauty in male vulnerability. Denzel taught me what intentional love feels like. And Johnny, he taught me the cost of connection. A quiet breath escaped her. These men shaped me, not as an actress, as a human being. The host waited a moment, then asked the question hanging in every viewer's mind. So why tell the world now? Julia smiled, but not the polished Hollywood smile. This one was different, honest, grounded, real. Because I'm finally old enough, she said, to stop pretending I'm smaller or simpler than I am. These stories shaped me. They're mine, and I'm done apologizing for being human. Her eyes glowed with a truth that felt both liberating and final. At 58, I don't need permission to be real anymore. She leaned back in her chair as though a weight had finally lifted. And real, she whispered, is far more beautiful than perfect. For a long moment after Julia stopped speaking, the studio remained suspended in absolute stillness. Not out of shock, not out of a scandal, but out of reverence, as if everyone present understood they had just witnessed something rare, something honest, something that peeled away decades of myth and revealed the woman behind the legend. Julia took a slow breath, settling into her chair as though releasing a weight she had carried for half her life. "You know," she began, her voice softer now, wiser, "the world has always seen me as the romantic heroine, the woman who runs through airports, who believes in destiny, who finds love in the final act." Her smile grew reflective, tinged with irony. But life isn't a movie. It doesn't fade to black after the kiss. It's complicated, messy, confusing, and incredibly beautiful because of it. She folded her hands gently as if holding the memories themselves. These 7 men, she continued, weren't chapters in a scandal. They were chapters in my life. Each one revealed something about who I was and who I was becoming. There was no regret in her eyes, only clarity. Tom taught me intensity. Brad taught me grace. Leo taught me the passion of ideas. Owen taught me the power of laughter. Matthew showed me emotional courage. Denzel taught me respect. And Johnny, she paused, her eyes deepening. Johnny taught me the cost and the gift of loving deeply. She exhaled slowly, letting the meaning settle. They weren't mistakes. They weren't secrets. They were moments that shaped my heart. And I wouldn't trade any of them. The host finally leaned in, speaking gently. "What do you hope people take from your story, Julia?" Her answer came instantly, simple, powerful, unguarded. That being human is not something to be ashamed of. She let the words hang there, then added, "We're all taught to hide the parts of our lives that are complicated, to bury the things we don't want judged. But the truth is, those are the parts that make us who we are, the parts that make us real." A long, slow smile grew across her face. No longer the famous Julia Roberts smile, crafted for magazines and red carpets, but the smile of a woman who had finally stepped fully into herself. For nearly 40 years, she said, I acted out stories about love, but the real stories, the ones that shaped me, were happening quietly, behind the scenes. And maybe it's time the world understood that even the people they think have everything are still learning how to live, how to love, and how to forgive themselves. She lifted her chin, her voice firm yet tender. If there's one thing I want people to know, it's this. You are allowed to have a past. You are allowed to have chapters no one else understands. And you are allowed to be more complicated, more emotional, more imperfect than the world wants you to be. A soft light seemed to glow around her now, not from the studio lamps, but from the truth she had finally allowed herself to speak aloud. At 58, she whispered, I've finally stopped living for the version of me the world expects, and I've started living for the woman I actually am. The host nodded, unable to hide his awe. That, Julia added, her smile warm and final, is my real story. The cameras captured her face as the interview wrapped. Serene, unburdened, luminously human. Not the Hollywood fantasy, not America's sweetheart, just Julia, real, imperfect, extraordinary.